it's the confirmation of their mimicry, but to the extent in which they use it, to the extent that they use elements around them to mimic and move around. So it's not just a mimic, but one can make a certain local noise while the other one is moving.
So they'll decoy for each other.
Yes, absolutely, while using the same environmental noises. So what we've seen in Eyewitness's case, for instance, give it a perfect example, the heater kicks in, the Dogman moves. Right? The TV commercial comes up. We all know commercials are louder.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So the commercial comes up, the Dogman move. The person on this side talks, and the Dogman moves around the house.
Yeah, right? I've had that happen in campouts, in night camps. Your plane will fly over, car will go by from a distance, and create enough cover noise that you can't, they're moving, because you'll hear additional clutter in the background, but it's just enough noise to cover up what they're doing.
Right. Well, and when you're out more in the woods, they will make their own noises, for the other one to move.
Yeah.
So it becomes kind of eye-opening, because normally you're out in the woods, you hear birds of all different types. Sometimes you'll and it has happened to me where you'll hear a bird and you have like a suspicion, and you'll turn around and that bird will just shut up, like automatically just shut up just because you turned your head, which is not normal behavior. But then on this side, it's like, okay, I know the one behind me is, but I'm not keeping my eye off of the one that's in front of me.
Yeah, and that seems to be a common denominator I notice with how they seem to react. One will get you to focus on it, to give the other one time to move to a safer area or to an area where it can conceal. Animals do that all the time. I think that's part of how some species of animals also react to nature. It's not just limited to cryptids.
So it's that stuff that's been, like I said, it, but until you're there constantly, you don't realize how awe-inspiring it is to see. And then when you're there, like on a 24-hour basis, you say to yourself, well, no wonder people don't know about cryptids, for those who are not in the in the community or whatnot, because they'll easily camouflage everything they do around the environment that you're adapted to. And it's so harmonious how they do it, that unless you've been there long enough to catch, okay, that pitch of that whippoorwill is too high or too low, or that doesn't sound right like the other ones. Or, for instance, we have a pack of coyotes, and I'm gonna use the word, there's something in the pack of coyotes that has a totally different pitch and a totally louder pitch, right? So when he goes off, that that's not the coyotes, but he's in there.
Yeah, we heard that at one of our campouts
in Illinois, yes.
Yeah, it was in Illinois. It was what I refer to as the canal park coyote caller. He sort of was just incredibly loud, and the bass, it was like a coyote on steroids that was huge, and it was not, you had heard it before, I hadn't, and I was like, yeah, I knew this wasn't right.
Right.
And I was like, this is not a coyote that I'm familiar with. I says, I know there's wolves in Illinois, but this was reacting with the coyotes, and it was pretty close,
right,
for where the coyote calls came from. So to me, it's not that big of a leap to say, well, yeah, this other thing is occurring too in tandem with the coyote calls.
Right.
And so that, and Bigfoot does something very similar too,
right,
in that regard.
And then, stuff like that. The just the watchful nature. I've gotten some stuff thrown at me, but it's subtle. I think that after the Bigfoot did the slap, and I had like completely no reaction to the slap, although internally I was scared crapless.
Yeah, yeah.
Because the thing was a wiffle ball throw away, and we all know a wiffle ball ain't heavy, so you can't throw it far. So when I say this thing was a wiffle ball throw away, that's how close it was to me.
That's close.
You know, and when you hear a human slap, like two hands slapping, right? Well, your butt's gonna pucker, you know, especially when you're out in the middle of nowhere. And again, I didn't react. I didn't turn my head. I kept on walking. You know, I was going to put my dog inside, and I was careful because my dog's iffy about strange things, right? So I gave him multiple commands to go into his crate just to make sure he didn't turn around and go figure out who that slap was from.
What breed is your dog?
He's a Mastiff Bulldog mix.
Okay.
At least the one that catches these weird things. He's the one that has this strange, I say strange ability, you know, to say, well, that's not a deer. I know what a deer sounds like. That's not a whippoorwill. I know what a whippoorwill smells like.
See, I think dogs even have genetic memory.
Oh,
that it's part of their genetic memory that they probably, going back God knows how many generations, have this instilled in them as a survival technique to tell the difference between, you know, a normal natural creature as opposed to something imitating the creature.
The other dog, which is an American Bulldog, she'll hear things and she's like, whatever, that's a whippoorwill, or that's this. She might pop her head up but nothing. But the youngster, like I said, he'll hear whippoorwills, nothing whatsoever. He'll hear that mimic, which, for a human's sake, it's another whippoorwill. If he got up and he starts going off like ballistic nuts, then you know that so-called whippoorwill that you heard isn't a whippoorwill.
You got something. You got visitors then.
Right.
You got visitors. That's cool. I mean, it's nice to have that, you know, there, because without him being there, again, you would make that assumption, or you'd eventually arrive at that yourself. But you might not have the forbearance to know in advance like he does. You know, I think dogs' sense of smell, and it's a couple factors: smell and hearing, and eyesight. A lot of things that dogs, they have much better abilities that way than we do, regarding our five senses. You know.
Right. Yeah. No. He's like I said. Hopefully they won't take him out because he knows their movement. But
I'll tell you, if it was Bigfoot, based on the right circumstances, if Bigfoot are irritated by barking dogs that bark endlessly, that have dogs that just don't have poor training and they just bark endlessly, there's just, I've lost count of the stories I've heard about these dogs being taken and killed just on the res alone.
Right.
Not to mention people. They just take dogs. It's just very easy to take a dog. People don't realize, you know, your dog runs ahead. When I'm in the woods, when I had my dog, he'd run 15 to 20 feet ahead of me. He was sort of the point man. Those are the sort of perfect conditions to be taken. Right. So those dogs disappear pretty quickly, and they'll take them. And people think, oh, Bigfoot take their dogs and eat them. No, they're found in pieces. They tear them up. They don't hate dogs. And I'm not saying all Bigfoot, but you know, I have people that want to come with me and ask me if they could take their dog with me when I go on my hikes, my evidence gathering hikes, and I go, no. I says, I'm not in there. I said, I take your dog. I'm not going to ensure or guarantee your dog's going to come back, because I go into some pretty iffy areas, and as you know, a dog, well, it smells or hears something, it'll run right into the bush, not even knowing what's in there, just hearing it. And that's how those things happen. The dog gets taken, and I look at it. I want to be able to go back to these areas and not piss them off by having somebody's dog run through the area. And I have had the whoops and barks. There are no blog dogs in the areas I go in. These are, and re-examining those barks, they came out, when I scrubbed through the video, the audio, they came out as whoops. Once I listened to them closer, and they were pretty pronounced. And a few incidences where I was surrounded in my own video claiming that I heard several dogs, and I could hear people talking with the dogs, and I was anywhere near anybody's farmhouse, no people walking in the wilderness with dogs, no, and subsequent visits back to that same area, the dog barks start right before dusk, right before it gets dark. The dog barks start, and if you listen, you can tell they're whoops. They're not dog barks. And they can imitate dog barks, just like we can.
That was like me and Randy went to an area where I had found a track and some X structures. We had gone to make sound surveillances as recon sound recons to see what the night produces, and something that's typical of Dogman. Once night fell, I don't know, it was probably around, I don't know, maybe 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. You'd hear the hound type barks coming out of the woods.
Yeah, it's like a baying. I call it baying. Baying. Yeah. From
one side, and then you had the Bigfoots on the other side. And then I believe Randy asked me, what's over there? Trying to figure out if there's actually dogs over there. When I looked at the Google map, and I showed him, there is absolutely nothing besides the wilderness over there. So
yeah.
You tell me, because there's nothing over there. So it's and even at Winnie's house, which is interesting. Going back to the mimicry, it's just beautiful to watch through the time, years, places. At the Eyewitness's house that I was last time when we were recording, his father owned hounds.
Real interesting.
And the dogs, the dogmen would bark in the vicinity like hounds versus anything else, because that's what was normal for the area. That
was local for them.
Right.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Like hounds.
It makes sense.
And the eyewitness, remember one day his father had sent them, if I'm not mistaken, had sent them to check out because he probably, he thought that one of the dogs had gotten out or something. And when he went out, he realized all the dogs were there, but there was something else barking in the woods back, like a hound.
Wow.
And it's just it just amazes me. For every place, for every scenario, and I've heard this about Bigfoot making motorcycle calls,
yeah,
and car sounds, because at the other side of the person's property is a road. So that's what they use.
They make car sounds. Yeah, they even make. I've heard them. I haven't heard them, but I've heard recordings of them in an area where, at a certain time of the evening, like at 6 p.m., this freight train would go through, with pulling 100 cars, and the locomotive would always blow its whistle, the train whistle. Mm-hmm. Well, people started hearing the train arriving 4 hours later in the night after the first train went through. They hear it again at like 10, 11 o'clock at night, the train whistle, but there would be no train going through. So they were replicating, they were imitating, the Bigfoot were imitating the train whistle. And I even heard where they went as far as, one guy has a recording of tent zippers in the middle of the woods. There's no tents, nobody's out there camping, and you hear pretty close, sounds like it's 50, 60 feet away, maybe, of a tent zipper. Sounds like somebody's taking their tent and zipping it up and down, and it reminds me of this bird in Australia called the kookaburra, and it imitates chainsaws, it imitates zippers, it imitates anything you can think of. This thing can create. Like if you take a hammer and hit a metal block, it'll replicate that sound. Bigfoot has this ability. It's a great mimic. It has motorcycles. I heard chainsaws. I heard tent zippers. So, when I've camped at night, that time we had 4 or 5 tents in camp, and I'm thinking, God, with all the tent zippers and all the clanging we're making, who knows what percentage of that time it wasn't really us making those noises.
Right.
We'd have to holler out, it's just me zipping it's just me. I just got my frying pan out of my backpack. Oh, it's just me. I just started a fire. See, it's very easy to trick us. We're myopic when it comes to this. And that brings me to my next question. Do you think dogmen are careful about where they leave their tracks, their footprints? Are they like very discriminating, or do they even care? I mean, will you find that their tracks, they were carefully picked through? They picked through an area, walked through an area, and were careful where they stepped? Or on other times, do you see that you'll find an area where it's sandy or muddy, and they just walk through it with no problem?
Okay, the problem that I'm finding with the tracks, right, is that depending on how they're walking, some tracks look like oversized cat tracks with claws.
Okay.
Others look like canine tracks, but more rounded like a cat.
Okay.
Now, dogmen also like to go on trees. So it's a bit easier to not leave as many footprints because they'll go from tree to tree.
Oh, okay. I wondered if they did that. I know Bigfoot does. They'll go tree to tree, and they'll just so then they can move pretty well. Most of the forest around me, you can go through an entire forest without ever touching the ground.
Right. So, and they'll walk on the water. If there's a river, creek, whatever, they'll walk on water. I don't think that they're as discriminating as, let's say, a Bigfoot when it comes to their own tracks. It's just circumstances, and I believe a lot of people actually see dogman tracks, but rather throw it off as, oh, that's just a dog, or that's just a big cat.
So it's just they can dismiss it easier because it looks very similar to domestic dogs or a large cat.
And although a dogman's track is different from a domestic dog, it has those characteristics. Like I have a picture from North Carolina, and a picture also from Kentucky. When you look at the track, it's a dog. It's your first impression. It's a cat because it's round.
Right.
It's not like oval. But when you look at the pad, when it's on sand, for instance, right, that you can't see the different structures of the pad, you'll notice it's just canine type.
Yeah.
But the whole thing is like a saucer versus an oval shape.
Yeah, and that's what I noticed about canine, where they'll be oval shape. Feline or cat prints are more like a flower, or they're more rounder.
Rounder. Well,
yeah.
As they get older, they'll have a round foot because of the weight versus the oval shape. And then depending on the genetics of certain ones, certain parts of their back foot hits the ground, and it'll have an indentation. Which we have cast. You have casts.
Yeah.
Of those. But so.
Yeah, those casts were not. They're right out in the open, mixed with other animal tracks. And we're like, to me, there was no attempt to conceal it. Now, if I saw Bigfoot tracks in that situation, more often than not, it would be the smaller ones, and they would be confused for young human beings, teenagers, or our children. So Bigfoot has that benefit of their foot being human-like enough that most people, the majority of us, will discount it and say that's just a person walking barefooted.
Right.
And I see to find that's sort of an easier thing for them.
I think that's what's happening with Dogman, is that a lot of the tracks are just being misidentified, or not even looked at because, so because you got to remember, your typical Joe out in the woods, right, doesn't really care about tracks. I've shown or seen Dogman tracks, and the person says, "Oh, that's a bear," and you scratch your head because bears have 5 toes, not 4.
Yeah.
So, and by that, what I'm saying is, you have a lot of people who don't know much, if anything, about tracks.
And the bear is usually on all fours, and its rear foot looks more. Its 2 rear feet look more human-like than its front paw.
Right.
And it's but you can always tell it's a bear because the distribution and size of the paw. And,
right. So it's just, to me, it's just on that aspects, you have a lot of misidentification, people who just don't care, and a lot of the tracks are probably out there, out in the open.
Yeah. I think that was the case with even the ones I found. I had been through that area so many times and probably dismissed it as people walking their dog through these mud flat areas during the day. Right. And then, of course, discovered they appeared during the rain overnight to be found the next morning. And then I found out about it through Chris, but thinking that I had probably walked past Dogman prints and just dismissed it as just domestic animals.
It's funny because Chris sent me she sent me the pictures through PM, and the second she sent me the pictures, my brain was like, I do you know what you just took a picture of? And I even asked her, did it just rain that day or the day before? And she had mentioned yes, whatnot. So, and I contacted you to go down there before it rained again, because there's a theory why you found the tracks after it rained.
Yeah.
But anyways, the size difference, because she had taken a picture of one next to her foot.
Yeah, she was comparing it, and that's what the only reason why she took a picture, I think, to some extent shared it with you, because it was beyond the size realm of what she was used to seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And plus the strange characteristics of the print,
right,
which sort of suggested there's something else going on here, was why she shared it with you, because she noticed that it was strange.
Yeah.
And it was just enough strangeness to it to actually open this thing up. So it was a great discovery.
Well, no, it was. And then you have, there's a picture that you took when you went down there, of a baby track.
Yeah, there's several of those too.
Okay, which is funny. I've shown that to some people.
I should have cast them, but I could have cast them, but I thought, again, going on the fact that the larger prints were more distinctive in their quality and in their detail, that a plaster was better used for that. But I had enough plaster where I could have cast those really small puppy, or I don't know what you'd call a baby Dogman, but a puppy impression of a baby Dogman. And I was like, the fact that it looked like it was almost trying to balance itself.
Right.
You can tell by the indentations of the digit impressions that it was each impression was different.
Right.
Even though it was the same individual.
Right.
So that sort of blew. So when I took those pictures, I had to send them to you because my suspicion was this one of theirs? Was this one of their young ones? And I suspected that, and then you sort of confirmed it with your explanation later on.
And then I have from an eyewitness, I have that same track, same look, right? Because you know how that little that little pad on the back side of the track on that one was like twisted, turned, versus just a dot on the back of the other tracks. Well, I have a full-grown picture of that same print, just larger.
Interesting.
You know, which is the same size as the eyewitness's foot as well, just like Chris's foot was the same size as the other track.
Yeah.
So we see that the same print, just the baby one that you took and a full-grown one from thousands of miles away from a different location. It's the same track.
Yeah, see, that's a consistency you look for, that repeatability. Right. And that's great because you'll find it in different locations, different environments. Despite the size differences, it's good to sort of, document that, get that evidence, and then later on sit there and compare. Your casts or whatever you're normally doing, you get to compare those. And that's why I think it's great when people can work together. We sort of do that too in our small group of people that we have. We work together, but trying to get people interested who live in other states, it's very difficult in these times with COVID. And of course, a couple of the guys that want me to get together with them are out of state. You, of course, are out of state too. And I've been invited to a couple places in Colorado now, and I told them to come to Illinois. I says, I got more than enough I can handle right here. I really don't need to go anywhere. I don't need to go to the PNC or PNW, Pacific Northwest, to confirm that Bigfoot are up there. They're probably every state. Dogman, I have a feeling, are probably have a great distribution across the continental United States. And I'm not mentioning other countries, so even though I know there's eyewitness testimony from other countries, but I guess that would be my interest would be collaborative, comparing other people's data to what you and I have gotten over a period of time. But I haven't seen Randy in a while, and I know he still lives in Wisconsin, right?
Yes, yeah.
But what's that?
No, that he still does.
Okay. Do a name drop for him, so in case he ever watches this, he'll give me a thumbs up. Give you a thumbs up.